Welcome to this micro course, providing you with best practice skills and know-how. This session is given to you by the Van Haren Group, your partner to enable best practice learning. With your host, Maurits van der Plas.
Hello everyone, welcome to this micro course about data-driven decision making. I'm here with Ton Godtschalk, managing consultant at Capgemini. Ton is also the lead trainer within Capgemini Academy on data and AI. We know each other for quite a bit already. Thank you, Ton, for being here and giving us some insights about the data-driven decision making. Always follow the math, always follow the figures. That's the general story. I will just give the stage to Ton. Ton, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Maurits. It's a pleasure to have you all here, and also to see that many people from different places are dialing in from Spain, from Den Bosch, from Utrecht. Oh, perfect. All right. So we're going to talk about discovering the power of data, about data-driven decision making. And first of all, I'd like you to think about, and while we are waiting for some more people to connect, there's a picture of a water pump here. Why do you think it's included in a data-driven decision-making micro course? Please leave your comments in the comments section if you have any clue on this. Just as a small...
I already participated. I already seen this presentation, so I don't think it's very fair if I participate. But I think that at first instant, it's a hard guess.
Part of the story is also that there is a nice pub on the other side of the road, and the pump is also still there. All right. While waiting for you,
we already got somebody going straight for the answer.
Cholera in London, yeah, that's Theo. Yeah. Theo knows the answer. He knows the answer. Nice. We'll come back to this in a second. Please, the house rules. Please, you have your camera off for the bandwidth of this the stream. Mute yourself when not speaking. Raise your questions using the comments, and this session will be recorded, just that you know. But I can't wait, basically, to tell you more about data-driven decision-making. We just had the intro to the session and the icebreaker, so let's get started. First of all, I will introduce myself, of course. I saw and I realized this morning that I have the same jacket on as I have on the picture here. So that's easier to recognize me then, that I'm really the person who is also visible on the slide now. But I'm Ton Godtschalk from Capgemini Academy, and I'm the lead data trainer from there. So I'm working now for more than a decade on data, and I'd love to share all my knowledge via the Capgemini Academy as a trainer, as I do also in this micro course. So indeed, as Theo was already mentioning, this is the very first data-driven example, which was in the 19th century, where Jon Snow, not to be mistaken with the person from the Netflix series, Game of Thrones, I think it is, but he basically was the first one who showed with descriptive statistics that the outbreak of cholera was related to contaminated water from a water pump and not from what they thought earlier because of a cholera phantom or because of foul air. So what he did was he put a hyphen on a map each and every time there was a deceased person due to cholera. And in the middle of Broad Street, there was a pump in there. So he basically put up a hypothesis that it might be the water coming from the pump that was causing the cholera and not the cholera phantom or the foul air, which was thought by, for example, Florence Nightingale, who was a famous philosopher at the time. So he needed to convince many. But of course, this is a data-driven micro course, so it wouldn't be in this data-driven micro course if it wasn't true in the end that he was actually right. But it was actually the first time that descriptive statistics data was actually used to prove something. Good news, the pump is still there in London, so you might visit it if you want. It's not functioning, so there's no danger in there. And as I said earlier, there's a nice pub also on the other side of the road. So if you like pubs more than this water pump, then you're also in a good place there. One of my favorite other examples is the data-driven example in baseball, the introduction basically of really sophisticated and advanced data analytics in baseball, which was around 2002, where the Oakland Athletics, which is a very poor team, just lost their best players. You could say it's almost like Feyenoord losing Jimenez, then it's a very poor team. Did I say that out loud? I did. So what did they do? Basically, they took a new approach by buying new players, but not anymore based on basically the gut feelings of all the old scouts, but they took data to find out what were the right characteristics for them to buy new players that are maybe cheap, but really underestimated. And of course, also here, it wouldn't be in this micro course if it wasn't with a happy end. So what they had, sorry for the misclick there, that resulted in 20 consecutive wins, setting a new Major League Baseball record at the time. So they were quite successful in that. And as a result, of course, there is no baseball club anymore in America which doesn't apply data in buying their players and doing all kinds of characteristics. So having heard two of those stories, I'd like to talk with you about what is actually working data-driven. And I'd like to hear your answer in the chat, A, B, C, or D, where you could say which statement about being a data-driven organization basically suits best. So is that A, all decisions in an organization are based on the gut feeling of the board, like the scouts in the baseball team of the Oakland Athletics? Is it B, all decisions in an organization are automatically generated by data? C, all decisions in organizations are supported by data? Or is it D, it depends. Some decisions are automatically generated by data and some of them are supported by data. Please provide your answer in the comments section. And by the way, I forgot to mention, but there is a lovely movie, by the way, about the Moneyball example, Oakland Athletics. There is the nice movie of Moneyball, which you can also see on, I forgot, Maurits, where you can watch it. Was it HBO or is it Netflix? I think you know.
Oh, I recently had it on Raccoon TV, for those who, it was on my remote controller. But that one has it for sure. I don't know exactly if it's Netflix or any of the other ones, but yeah. Well, we already get quite some suggestions here. On your question. So that there's several. We see that initially C was an overhand, but then more perspectives on D came in. Thank you all for sharing. I think Yusra is doubting if it's D or not. So I think D is in a majority, and I personally would also go for D.
Very good.
Initially A, but it should be D, I think.
Yeah, you passed the test. D is indeed the correct answer here. Some decisions are automatically generated by data and some decisions are supported by data. So let us see some examples of that. By the way, data-driven decision-making, I'd love to emphasize that I use this pyramid quite often actually to explain how data-driven organizations should work. It's basically data is the foundation, but data is just numbers. It's just 2, 4, 8, 27, whatever it is, but it doesn't have any context in it. So in order to get some value out of the data, the first step you take is to describe it properly so that there is meaning in those. And so then it becomes information. And so if I tell you that 3 is the amount of persons that is currently present in this room, then you know that what I'm talking about. Knowledge is about drawing conclusions based on this information. Yeah, so, for example, we could say, okay, so 26 is the number of participants in this micro course. You all subscribed. I expect 27, so 1 is missing. Yeah? So the 1 is missing part is the knowledge part. And then we could go with all the backgrounds that we have in all the previous knowledge and previous history that we know about having these micro courses. Then we know what to do and turn this into action. So being data-driven basically comes down to make sure that from the data, it in the end turns up into an action and either automatically generated or supported by it. So let me give you some examples. And most people have this in their home. Yeah, so it's a thermostat, and basically you set it on a certain threshold, and once it reaches the threshold, it basically knows automatically what to do. And so this is completely data-driven. There's no human interception any longer. We completely know what to do. And so here we are fully data-driven in this case. Another example is, of course, your car navigation. And within the car navigation, you see that based on all kinds of data, there's all the other cars on the road, all the other traffic, which basically determines how to get from destination A to destination B in the fastest amount of time. Then it will make sure that it will find the optimal route for you, but you're still in the driver's seat. So you're still in a position to deviate from that suggested route. So it's not fully data-driven, it's supporting you. You could say it's information-driven in this context. But more and more, of course, we are heading also here towards fully data-driven, where we also have self-driving cars. And in the session that Maurits was mentioning that he saw me presenting some of those slides earlier, we had a nice discussion also about, will we end up in a fully autonomous set of self-driving cars somewhere in the future? Let's find out. Maybe it's nice in the comment section to leave, how long do you think is it going to take before we are ending up in a fully autonomous self-driving car situation?
I already lost a bit of a bottle of wine on this one once, so be careful.
I think we said 2035 for ourselves, wasn't it?
I once said 2018. I didn't make that bet.
Yeah. Oy, oy. Yeah, so nice comments coming in. So what I also like to encourage you to share your opinion on is we had several examples now on data-driven and data-supported. But hearing those stories, what would be a very nice, appropriate term, depending on my salary raise, user says. Oy, oy, oy. So what would be a nice proper fit for the term of data-supported or data-driven? I've heard several terms also here within Capgemini. I've heard other terminology next to data-driven or data-supported, but what is a term that you think is a proper fit for working with data in general, let's say?
So the data-driven sounds cooler, right? You have two Ds, so it rolls off easier. But yeah, I have had a discussion once with a expert in data who was very clear that it should be data supported or data guided. But yeah, data driven, it just sounds nicer. Not having to think about it, it all happens by itself.
Yeah. I also hear people talking about data powered. Yeah. Sounds like an American term also. Data powered.
Data powered, yeah. Although it gives a bit of the same inclination as data supported. So basically saying that data is not the one behind the driver's seat. I think that's the essence, right? Here we got George Pluimaker say, data as such has no value, the value has to be pumped in. And here we got another suggestion, data-centric.
Data-centric I like as well, yes.
Yeah. But I think data-centric is another connotation again. It's another view on it.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you for sharing those insights. Let's move over to how to get from data to an action, because we have talked about this pyramid, so how to do this properly. And for this, I used a very old model in the sense of CRISP-DM, which was initially there for data mining, which we can basically apply to each and every data project that is out there. And basically this says you should start with a business understanding. Always understand what is the question first. Then comes the data understanding with it. We might also need to prepare the data before it's actually ready to get modeled and to be able to get some value out of it. When we created a model, then of course we need to evaluate. If it's not proper, then we need to get back to our business understanding. But at some point we will be there and we'll be able to say like everything is a thumbs up, and then we go to deployment. Once we're in deployment, we're not there yet because we always need to make sure that it's a continuous process and that the circumstances did not change in the meantime under which we made some assumptions while creating the model. So let us dive into this. As I mentioned, it's first about business understanding. So it's not just an IT party. So it used to be, let's say 10, 15 years back, it used to be the party like, okay, please, IT, create a sales report for me. Sales of IT said, okay, I'm going to deliver this for you. I'm going to build a report. It took them 3 months to build it. They came back to the business and then they said, like, business looked at the report and thought like, hey, but this is not what I asked for. And this is typically how this goes. So these days, when working data-driven, it's about the collaboration between data and making sure to bridge the gap between business and IT. Because if you bring those three elements together, then there's where the real value of data-driven decision-making is. We as IT people are not creating stuff just for the sake of having it. We are doing it for business because we need to enable and enforce decisions for them. So involve them and make sure, as you are a business partner, to get involved in the data understanding process. Because, as one of the statisticians mentioned, John Tukey, a very famous one, an approximate answer to the right problem is worth a good deal more than an exact answer to an approximate problem. It's the first step always. Make sure that you know what the problem is. There's also a nice scene in the Moneyball movie on this. So what's the problem? Santa too fat? Chimney too small? What's the problem here?
Santa has a bigger derrière than
big
appropriate.
Derrière. Oh, that's so polite.
Than appropriate for the chimney.
Wow.
I had this answer wrong, by the way, when I got this one. So I'm very curious what other people expect to be the right answer. What's the issue?
Because it's tempting to think about the size of Santa compared to the chimney. But if you think 1 second longer, then you should wonder basically what's the aim of Santa. And the aim of Santa is basically to get the presents to the children. And then is it necessary to go via the chimney? And the answer is obviously no. So the problem here is that Santa couldn't get the gifts to the children. And that's where your complete problem solving starts. It's about the business understanding what's the problem. And likewise, what's the problem here? What's the best company? Bram Buizert, I'm proud of you, man. Santa cannot deliver the presents, he says. Very good.
We also got a different view saying that the presents were too big. Yeah, it's different.
It's close. It was a close one, yes. Using the wrong entrance. That's also pretty close, Marjolein. Very good. And very good again, Bram. This depends on the criteria because I didn't share it with you based on what criteria, what's the best company, and that's the only correct answer here. I mean, if you think about the CO2 emission reduction, if it's very important to your company, then that is the way to go. Then Company A might be the best. If it's all about sales and customer satisfaction, then maybe C is the better one. So it always depends. So you got the message here. That's good news. Define best, Kathy. Very good. And so it all starts also with, next to the business understanding, what data am I looking at? And typically you see, like, we're talking about customers. How many customers do you have? How many customers do you have? And you're tempted to just provide an answer, 1,000, 1,000,000, whatever. But if you look and start closely asking people, like, but what do you actually mean by a customer? Then you could say, well, it's anyone who walks in the front door and asks for something. And the other definition is an individual who requests a product we will want to sell. So then it's actually a prospect or not. Which do you take into account in the definition of a customer? Yeah, so that's what it's all about. Making sure that you're on the same page. Because knowing the difference is most of the work. Yeah, data is typically scattered throughout an organization. And if that data needs to be combined to create a wonderful report, then first of all, it's a lot of work to know that there is a difference in definition. So there's a lot of hard work going on there. This data set, I wanted to say I love it, but it's a bit of a sad context. We know this from a couple of years back when we had the corona situation, where we see a lot of data coming in. And basically the question here is, how could we use this data? Can we basically compare countries based on the number of infected persons? Maybe we could create a worldwide strategy. Could we create not so much with this data or nothing at all? What do you think? A, B, C, or D? Please leave your answer in the chat again.
We need to very well compare all the different sheets.
There's lots of data going in here, yes. It's a nice one for you, Maurits, because this one was not in your training.
True, but I really need to zoom in.
Several countries.
I think it would enable you to compare countries, and compare countries, and from there hopefully create a strategy. Although I think that most people disagree with me. They say
most people say C, yes.
Yeah, with a long shot.
Katie,
yeah. Thanks, Katie.
Yeah. It's so nice, Maurits, to see that some people support you, but I have to disappoint you in this case because it's actually C. Yeah. Most people were right. But why? Because basically we should, again, think about what are we looking at? What does this data mean? And how is this data gathered? And if we only zoom in on the Netherlands and the Belgium situation, you see that in the Netherlands, our definition here of what is a diseased person was that we counted or administered them when people actually tested positive on corona and diseased from it. Whereas in Belgium, which is quite close to the Netherlands, as you might know, also when you're in Spain, in Belgium, they said, well, it's basically the number of deaths having symptoms that are strongly related to corona, not necessarily being tested positive for corona. And if you remember well, the early days of corona, we didn't have the ability to test basically if people were testing positive on corona. They were not there. So according to the Dutch definition, there was no people dying from corona in that period. Let's say March, April, May of 2020. Whereas in Belgium, of course, there were. So there's a lot of difference in data there. So I dare not to conclude that more people have disease in Belgium than in the Netherlands. I simply don't know. And so comparing countries in this context is dangerous. However, I can still do some kind of a trend analysis worldwide, basically, because at some point you saw that we had a new variant of the corona infection. I think it was called Omicron. That's a long way back already. But then you saw that there was the number of infections increased quite dramatically, where luckily the number of diseased persons didn't increase so much. So we had a weaker variant of the virus there. But this triggers the question, what data about the data, what documentation do we actually need to be able to understand this data? And for that, I already mentioned we have the context, but we also need to know who gathered this data. And so how reliable is the data gatherer? Was it coming from the hospitals or was it coming from the government? And to what extent can we trust those parties? Who's the owner of the data? What's the quality of the data? But also, when was the data gathered? Was it 20 years back? Was it 10 years back? Was it yesterday? Is it a live stream? What is it? So we definitely need to know. So also on the data quality, we're moving in the cycle of the CRISP-DM shift here of working data-driven. We need to prepare the data, and we also need to think about how to deal with some really strange values. We call them outliers or empty values. You see a not applicable here, you see an empty spot. How do we deal with that? And I'm not going to provide you an answer, also conscious of time, but we need to do something about it. I'm not going to talk about the modeling part. That's way too difficult for today. But we need to evaluate also, and we need to present the data also to our audience in the end. So if I present this, is it a 6 or is it a 9? I'm not going to ask you to leave the comments here, to leave your suggestion in the comments. But basically, the picture is speaking for itself. How you present your data is basically helping your audience also to interpret the data in the correct manner. And on the same line, is this a bird or is it a rabbit? What is it? It's just a matter of 90 degrees of a shift. And maybe as the last question to you now, in a pie chart, it's difficult to interpret the data. So which color has the highest contribution, do you think? Which has the biggest portion of the whole? Is it red? Is it blue? Is it green? Is it yellow? Is it black? What is it?
It feels like the colors themselves are also distracting you because it's harder to see. I would say 5 or 4, but it's hard to.
Yeah. What do you think now, Maurits?
I think now 4 or 3 or 2. So we got some views from the participants.
Yeah, black, yellow.
Same.
Yeah. It's hard to read, isn't it? So what if we present this in this manner?
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the picture. If your message that you try to come across with is to show your audience what is the biggest portion, please use the bottom chart. And so how we interpret and how we show the data helps in interpreting the data. So it also comes with a little bit of a storytelling. It's the soft skills that are the hardest to master, but they're critically important. It's not just about data. It's not just about the visual. There also needs to be a narrative in place if we come to data storytelling. Imagine the cholera outrage with Jon Snow. He wasn't able to do the job just with the data and the visual. That was not going to do the job. He needed to have a more proper story to also convince people like Florence Nightingale, the famous philosopher at the time. Well, all said and done, we are happy now with the model. Let's go to deployment. Always make sure also to, when you work with data, to mention all the hard work that you did, because basically people see only the tip of the iceberg. That's the visible portion of the work that you had. Make sure to also explain what has been going on so that people have a little bit of a feeling on how much work and how much effort it took to build the iceberg here. And as one of the last slides here, we need to keep on monitoring our data-driven decision-making, because we can perfectly predict how many people will be there on St. Marcus Square in Venice, based on the weather prediction, based on the time of the year, the weekday, based on all kinds of stuff. And then again, COVID bumps in and we are in a lockdown. The model will still say how crowded it will be with many, many people. But we know that when we are in a lockdown, we will have an empty square. So we need to take into account whether the circumstances under which the model was built is still stable. That brings us to the end of this micro course. We have been talking about data-driven versus data-supported, and I saw some nice suggestions also coming in the chat about other words that can be used here: data-centric, data-powered, and all kinds of other data stuff. And we talked about the whole cycle of making sure that we are ready as an organization to turn data into an action, and what kind of steps can be taken to get from there. Basically, it starts with business understanding, then we go to the data portion of it to understand that part. We need to tweak the data maybe slightly to put it into a model, evaluate it, bring it to deployment, and keep monitoring basically whether the result is still valid. That gives us the opportunity now also for you to ask your questions here in the comments.
sorry. So we've been discussing the different names it could be, if it should be data guided or data driven. But we haven't managed to figure it out. Maybe you did. Thank you. Yeah, I was speaking on mute. Apologies. I did a full dialogue there. We get some.
We've seen you talking about it.
Yeah, you were very patient listening to me. Thank you for that. So we get some questions, mainly if we can get the presentation. I think we can.
Sure.
Thanks. Here we got a proper question. What are the key components of data strategy documents besides objectives?
Yeah, that's a very nice question. And so we have seen a couple of the things you need to take into account when setting up a data strategy, basically for working data-driven. It has to do with the creation of data, and it has to do with responsibilities also. So we talked already about data governance. So who's the owner of the data? We talked about data quality. We talked about metadata management. But there is more that we need to take into account. I can highly recommend you also the DAMA DMBOK, which is the data management body of knowledge, which basically gives you an overview of the foundation that needs to take place, or that needs to be in place in order to work with data. And then we also elaborate there a little bit more about data security, data privacy, like the GDPR and stuff, how to set up a proper data architecture. So there's lots more in there. And also based on that, you need to take into account your tooling and the people, which roles and responsibilities do you encounter. I hope that answers your question, Chandrani.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Ton. I think we'll wrap up there. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your elaboration. And up until the next micro course.
Yes, thank you all for joining, and have a great weekend ahead.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
We at the Van Haren Group believe that organizations can benefit from shared knowledge and experiences, and we try to help them to do so. We are an independent, worldwide recognized content provider in management best practices and standards, well known for its flexibility and years of experience. Our education partners offer specialized training using our books, courseware, e-learnings, and exams. These partners play a crucial role in delivering high-quality education to professionals, leveraging our products to ensure comprehensive and effective learning experiences. At Van Haren Group, we're more than just a publisher. Our unwavering commitment to quality, passion, trust, fairness, and forward-thinking drives everything we do. We are dedicated to empowering professionals and organizations worldwide to achieve their goals and thrive in today's dynamic landscape. Dream, learn, and achieve with Van Haren Group.
Do you want to apply a best practice yourself and maybe leverage our services? Do get in contact with us. We are more than happy to advise how to take the next step.